heal as a team, we're going to crumble. Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen, believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell. 1 inch at a time. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from you. I mean, that's part of life. But you only learn that when you start losing stuff. You find out life's this game of inches. So is football. Because in either game, life or football, the margin for error is so small. I mean, 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the fucking difference between winning and losing. It's the guy who's willing to die who's going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is. There's 6 inches in front of your face. Now, I can't make you do it. You got to look at the guy next to you. Look into his eyes. Now, I think you're going to see who will go that inch with you. You're going to see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're going to do the same for him. That's a team, gentlemen. And either we heal now as a team, or we will die as individuals.
Ideas are bulletproof.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. It is January 4th, 2012. This is another live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. And tonight, I have an info-packed show for you, ladies and gentlemen. I have 2 very special guests that are going to hang out with me tonight. Both of them have been guests here on my show before, but this is the first time that they are both on the show together. Very important that I have both of them on. Not just because I get different viewpoints, but because one of them, who was a recent guest on my show, has been threatened. And in fact, we're going to get right into that. So let me introduce them, and then we'll get right into what I was talking about. First, let me say hello to my good buddy, Steve Stars. Steve, how are you tonight?
Very good, Popeye. Glad to be with you. A lot of news going on. A great guest that you have coming up pretty quick here, and so we'll commence and get into a great show.
Thanks for coming on and hanging out, Steve. I appreciate it. My other guest is Christina Consolo, a.k.a. the RadChick, who was on my show for 2 hours this past Sunday, and afterwards had a interesting experience a couple days later, and that's why she's back on tonight. She's going to hang out for as long as she wants to, too. But I wanted to get her on to talk specifically about this first tonight because, you know, the more spotlight we shed on something, a lot of the times the safer researchers are. So, Christina, welcome to the show, and tell the listeners what you and your daughter went through. We have a few minutes before break, so go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay, well, yeah, two days after I was on your show, there was another problem at Fukushima. One of the spent fuel pools started losing water after a big earthquake that they had there on the 1st. And that next evening, my boyfriend and I went to the Army Navy surplus store to kind of price out some stuff if we needed to shelter indoors in case something happened. And you and I had kind of talked extensively about that scenario, but it seemed to be happening maybe a little quicker than I anticipated. So we had gone to the Army Navy surplus, and we didn't buy anything, and thank goodness we didn't, because we would have had all kinds of crazy stuff in our car if we did, like gas masks and things of that nature. We were sitting in the car for maybe 5 minutes, no longer than 10 minutes, and we were actually having a very lovely conversation. And all of a sudden, our car was surrounded by police officers. There were 5 cars that pulled up. They blocked us in. They parked on either side of us. There was about 7 officers from 3 different departments, 2 undercover guys, and then over the course of the next 2 hours, there were a couple other cars that came and left to see what was going on. And it was a very, very strange and surreal situation. There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of different stories being told to different people. They told, when they first got there, they wouldn't let us out of the car. They asked what we were doing in the car. We said we were just talking.
And this isn't on a public street either. This is in your parking lot.
This is parked right in front of my apartment in my parking spot.
Yeah, so this is in your complex. So this is off the street on private property.
Right. And they wanted to know what we were doing in the car, and we said we were just talking. And they took our IDs, and after a little while, they came and they took my boyfriend out of the car and questioned him. And he asked, what is the problem? What exactly is going on here? And they said, our problem isn't with you. But we might have a problem with her, and they pointed to me. And they asked him some questions. Eventually they came and got me out of the car, too. They said that my kids wouldn't open the door to my house. They had been there earlier while we were at the store. And I told them, well, that's what they're instructed to do, is not open the door to anyone when I'm not home. And they seemed very irritated by that. They didn't have any kind of warrants or anything. They told us several lies, which are verifiable. They at first said that one of my kids was involved in a hit and run the night before, which wasn't true. She had one of my girls had a slight fender bender. She stopped. They exchanged information, which is what was all verified later. And then they said that the information she had given about the license plate was wrong, and that wasn't true either. She had given all the appropriate information. And then they were questioning me again, asking what we were talking about. I said we were just having a personal conversation. It wasn't any of their business. And they decided after a good hour and a half of this making us stand outside in 10-degree weather that they were going to take one of my kids in for an old shoplifting warrant. And we haven't been able to determine yet that there even was a warrant. She was with somebody who stole one CD from Walmart about 7 months ago. So, the situation doesn't make any sense at all. The outcome of it is they took her to jail. I had to bail her out later on. She was obviously very upset by the situation. There was some strange things that happened with the first scheme that she had to go through, and I'm attempting to get all of the dash cams from all the cars and all of the mic recordings if they're available under the Freedom of Information Act. But we're dealing with 3 different departments, 7 or 8 officers. It's $25 a pop for each one of these recordings and videos. And
what is it, $25 per officer?
Per officer and per dash cam. So we're talking like $300 to $400 to get this stuff together, but it's going to take probably a couple weeks because they have to close out whatever their investigation is. It was just a very, very strange situation, and none of them really seemed to know. Like, it seemed like they were really fishing.
Yeah, it seems like they were fishing, and they were more like they were sent there to kind of scare you and harass you. We're going to get cut off by the break. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Christina's going to hang out with us. We're going to get more into this when we get back. I want to get Steve's thoughts on this and more, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. In the chat room, somebody brought up they must have been following her for weeks, and I had made the same comment to Christina when she first told me about this, and we talked about it for a couple hours last night, and she had, when she related the story to me, I kept asking her all sorts of questions, details that she could remember, and there were undercover cops there, and the way that they had rolled up on her while she was in her car, to somebody that has, I used to be a federal law enforcement, agent through the Coast Guard, and who I've had that training, I've had that interaction. Plus, I know cops. I have good friends of mine that are police officers, and they're good cops, by the way. One of them quit actually recently because he couldn't put up with the crap anymore. So he just couldn't deal with it. And no, I won't say where he's from because I don't want to get him in trouble because I know his superiors listen to the show. That was part of the problem. Anyway, it was a tactical thing. So they were obviously watching you. I said that last night, that they had to have been watching you for at least an hour or so. Well, before they had to have been watching the area. They came over. You weren't, after you weren't there, they were sitting somewhere waiting for you to pull up. So they had to be there for at least an hour or more watching the area. And then it took you, 10 minutes to get out of your car? So they were watching you for at least 10 minutes when you pulled in, before they pulled up on you.
I guess they had been around here for a while because they had come over about 45 minutes before we came home, and that's when they knocked on the door and the kids wouldn't answer.
And then, so they were watching the house. They came over after a while. Kids wouldn't answer. And then they wait for you to come home. They watch, verify, because like you said, it took about 10 minutes, which that's about right. They'd wait to see if you get out of the car, see what's going on. Now, if you had gotten out of the car, they probably would have swarmed up on you as soon as you got out of the car.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah,
Steve
it was so fast and so crazy. Like,
Steve asked me a question. They didn't have a warrant, right?
No.
It sounds so totally absurd. And
what's your take on this, Steve? You've been sitting here quietly listening to this. What's your take on this?
This is police harassment. It's coming from the top down. There are a few bad cops and bad apples in the whole situation, and the others are getting caught up in this thing. And as Christina was telling us the story, obviously some of these cops are wondering what's going on with this whole situation too. But remember, there's this thin blue line where cops on the job are very rarely going to start to disrupt the situation or stand up for a citizen's rights when some cop is going off. And this is a real problem with the police. And my situation, or my thinking about the whole thing is, of course, if the listeners are just now joining us, Christina has been very vocal on the whole problem with Fukushima. She's been very much a person speaking about some very serious problems that the news media and a lot of other people do not want exposed. So the background is that there is somebody who is trying to target her and intimidate her with this kind of police harassment, and there are a lot of other cops getting caught up in this whole thing, all over a stolen CD that took place 7 months ago by somebody who her daughter was acquainted with. I don't buy it one bit.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they must have had to do something, like, to have that kind of, like, show of force. That there had to be, someone had to get arrested for something, I guess.
Well, yeah, there has
I don't know, but it makes it even more ridiculous that it's over something like that with that kind of manpower here for that period of time. And on top of that, I live next to one of the most crime-ridden cities in Michigan, Pontiac, Michigan. And there are murders and rapes and robberies that happen there every day. And they're 1 block over. I'm 1 block over from Pontiac, and they're, focusing on this stuff. I mean, come on. And they tried to drag me into a bunch of different conversations. They know that I'm a registered patient with the Michigan Medical Marijuana Program, and one of the cops was trying to instigate me by saying, that marijuana causes schizophrenia. There was a study that was just published, and I corrected him, and I said, well, actually, I worked for National Institutes of Health, and I'm well acquainted with that study. It was in the UK. It was in 2002, and what it showed was that very heavy long-term users, after 30 or 40 years of use, developed symptoms of schizophrenia. But he was trying to, I don't know. I really don't know. It was just so odd. Just all of these different conversations and them, telling everybody something different. And it was definitely, they were intimidating us. They handcuffed my daughter. They had standing out in the middle of the parking lot, her and I, face-to-face, talking, and while all of them stood around us. All 7 or 8 that were there at the time were surrounding us in a circle. And I said, can I zip up her coat? Because it was freezing outside. And they said, no, we're going to put her in the car. And, she was crying. She was very upset and, caught everybody off guard. But at the same time, I was calm. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. And I was, I wasn't really surprised by this. I've had a couple of emails from some of my subscribers on YouTube saying, be careful, because you're ticking off a lot of really scary people by what you're doing.
Well, you are. You're talking about things that they don't want covered.
Mm-hmm.
That kid Dutch Sense had the same problem. He was fine until he started running around doing radiation readings.
Yeah.
A couple of months back, and then he got a visit from the feds.
Yeah, and one of his friends got shot.
Yeah, one of his friends ended up getting shot, and I don't know if the guy survived or not, but one of his friends got shot mysteriously, and then he got a visit by the feds because he was right around the time that he was running around with the Geiger counter. It had nothing to, when he was talking about weather modification and hurricanes and HAARP and scalar technology, nothing. As soon as he started talking about Fukushima, and he started, doing videos and showing the radiation readings, all of a sudden he was public enemy number 1.
Uh-huh.
So,
well, I had a conversation that I didn't connect to any of this on New Year's Day. I have a friend that works at the Pentagon with the Humvee division, and I have been sending him emails for months asking him, what are they telling you about Fukushima? And he went home to Florida for the holidays, and his father's sick and has cancer, and he was helping out there. And he's been told by his superiors at the Pentagon that they do not expect more than 1,000 deaths in the U.S. total from Fukushima fallout. That's what their experts are telling the employees at the Pentagon. So, I mean, it's the government, they're not even telling their own workers. They're not telling their military. They're not telling their police department. And 3 months ago, I went to the city of Auburn Hills for a city council meeting. And after the meeting, I had a discussion with the chief of police. And it was right after the weekend, the Labor Day weekend. And in Michigan, the EPA graphs showed that over Labor Day weekend, our air quality, we had 350 CPMs in the outdoor air all weekend. And, those guys are outside all the time. And I was thinking, I wonder if the police department has been given any warning about taking protection, because that's over hazmat levels. And so I talked to this woman for a little while, and I told her what I was doing, and I told her about the EPA graphs, and I said, have you guys got any kind of warning from anybody about taking precautions with how much time your guys spend outside? And she knew nothing about it. So when I started talking about it, she's like, where's this radiation coming from?
You see? So even their own people don't know.
Even their own people don't know. They have no clue.
Yeah, they don't care. They eat their own, Christina. They don't care. That's The New World Order is evil. These people, I could sit and go on for hours about it. We're going to get cut off by the break. Ladies and gentlemen, stay right there. We'll be right back. 3 minutes. Stay tuned. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm hanging out with Christina Consolo and Steve Stars. And Christina's been telling her story about what happened to her the other day after she did a 2-hour show with me. And I don't believe it was because she was on my show. That would be kind of egocentric. I think it's because of all the work that she does.
Right.
And what she talks about. You know, when you speak truth, and especially about things that, nobody else is talking about, and you start to get a following, you do piss them off. I know what that's like. Trust me, I've had my visit by the feds before, too, so I know how you feel. It's kind of like an initiation. Now you're really part of the group, Christina. So when they start messing with you, I totally don't think this was done, because of your daughter and some stupid warrant, quote unquote. Which did they ever produce a warrant? Did you ever see a physical printed out warrant given to you?
No. I'm still trying to get information about that, about what that situation is.
And you're going to try to get all the dash cam video and everything, right?
Yep.
$25 per video.
And per recording for each one of their mics, they were even turned on.
How many hours of video did they even, bother to say that you'll get, because I mean... Yeah,
they were here but at least 2 hours that night.
But do you think that, did you ask them if they were going to give you the full thing? Or let me ask you this, I guess they only give you whatever took place during your incident. They obviously don't give you the entire, 8-hour recording for whatever the cop did for 8 hours. They probably only give you the time for your incident. So did they give you an idea of like how they know you're, you know what I mean? Is there going to be any editing job? Do you remember enough that if you get the video, you'll know if stuff was edited out?
Oh, for sure.
Okay, that's good. What you ought to do?
Sure. You don't forget. You don't forget things like that. I remember everything vividly.
Before you forget, if I were you, I would sit down with your daughters, your boyfriend, yourself, and I would go over everything and just take your camera, sit down and record yourselves going over the event, so that way as time goes by and other things get piled on top of you, you have a fresh account right there because you can watch yourself describe it in the video, and then that'll probably help you remember, oh yeah, and it'll make the memory fresh. That's what I would do if I were you. And record everybody's statements and keep them, just keep them on a memory card somewhere or put them on a CD or something. That way you have that.
Yeah, writing everything down is as good as testimony, I believe, and for recall purposes in case anything ever went to court. I've already had people offer one of the RadChicks on my website, has some legal connections and has offered to help me file a harassment suit against the departments that were involved. And I said, let's hold off. Let me see what I get first in terms of, hard copy stuff. And because I'm too busy to, be, dealing with this too. But if I've got a boatload of information and if she reviews it and thinks that we should go ahead of it, we're probably going to do that.
Did they ever file charges? Somebody in the chat room asked that. Rob, a friend of mine.
No, they have not filed any charges.
So they released her. You bailed her out, but they never filed any charges against her to be holding her. So how? No.
In fact, the police department that had the jurisdiction for the actual shoplifting, it was another department in Macomb County. And when they took her, when the county cops from here, they had to drive her to a location and then switch her to the other officers. And all the way there, they kept asking her, what were your mom and her boyfriend doing in the car? Why were they sitting in the car? They kept, trying to get information about that. And the other cops that had to come and get her were asking her then on the way to the jail, what is going on? This is really unusual for them to call us out here and this time of night for this kind of charge that's this old. What they were really ticked off about it, and they were actually talking some smack about the cops that were here to her.
So the other cops, the cops from the city that this incident happened in, which isn't the same city that she was arrested in, okay? They came to pick up your daughter, and do the transfer and all that crap, because that's how it has to be done. Mm-hmm. And they were talking crap to her, a quote-unquote, I'm doing air quotes, suspect, about the other police officers who had arrested her.
Yeah, and they said that it was highly unusual.
There you go.
And it didn't make any sense to them.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen, right from the horse's mouth. Steve, what do you think about that?
Well, did anybody miss a court date on the shoplifting case or anything like that, Christina? Was there a court date?
No, there was no court date. There's been no notification or anything. She was questioned at the time of the incident at the store.
Yeah, okay. This was essentially a petty larceny case, okay, at Walmart. All right, and most of the time, if you know anything about the way Walmart or any of these stores work, generally, if you get caught shoplifting, they take you in the back room before the police. You can actually settle with them in most cases, and over a $15 CD. I mean, this is so it's so incredibly small. But the point I was getting at, was there a court date or anything that she might have missed? Was she supposed to show up as a witness? What were the grounds of coming to your house? At what time in the morning was it again, Christina, roughly about?
Well, at this point, the transfer was made shortly before midnight, and I know that because it was her birthday.
What time
midnight.
did they arrest her initially?
In jail on her birthday.
Yeah.
Around 10:30 at night.
So does it really warrant coming at it? It's all odd. It doesn't. If they were going to do that, normally they would do this kind of stuff during the day. They'd send a uniform out to get you, and it wouldn't be 5 cops, including undercover cops. I mean, why are they using UCs for this? It doesn't make sense unless you're being, screwed with. Then it makes perfect sense.
This is petty larceny too. This is something that police generally don't even get involved. Until you have larceny of over, say $100, grand larceny. It's something that the police hardly ever take any time to deal with, unless it's to pick up a kid at the grocery store, just for his own good, and playing the local cop. But this is absurd. This is definitely police harassment, is what it is. And I'm just going to butt in and let you guys finish up a little bit. You're onto something here. There's something very, very wrong with this situation, and the other cops know it too.
Mm-hmm. Well, my boyfriend that was in the car with me, he had kind of an interesting take on the situation himself. Some of the comments that were made to me, which he told me later. I don't know if you want his input on this at all.
Yeah, you know what? When we come back, because we're going to go on a break in a few minutes, when we come back into the final segment of the first hour, I'll have him come on, and he can tell, his experience and what he went through and what he was told, how he was grilled. Because it's good to get, differing viewpoints that way, because, everybody's, personal experience also adds up to the collective experience. So It's good to get everybody's viewpoint.
Yeah. Let's hear him.
So, when we come back on the other side of the break, we'll bring him on. Steve, I want to ask you something.
Okay.
Because we got a few minutes, but I want to ask you something really quick. From your viewpoint, knowing, what you've been through and what you've seen other people, other researchers go through, do you think this is just low level, or do you think somebody maybe higher up maybe is pissed at her and they just, they know somebody? Because you know how that is, the good old boy network. You know somebody on the inside, you go to them, you tell them to get stuff done, and then they go to their crew and just say, do this, no questions asked, just do this.
Right.
And that's kind of what it looks like what happened.
I think this is extremely high up, Popeye, because if you see, obviously there's enough police officers, if we call them that aren't even aware of what's going on and why this is happening. Somebody is working for the feds on a very high level amidst this group, and he's the one that is targeting you for harassment, and he's dragging all the other clowns in blue along, and they're not knowing what's going on. The whole thing is absolutely absurd over a petty larceny case to make this kind of a federal issue. This is a very very high intimidation tactic that's coming probably from way beyond the FBI, people in national security or wherever it's coming from. Somebody there is working with very high-level feds, is my guess.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy.
Yeah, that's what I'm... See, again, great book to understand how this kind of stuff works. Great book to read. The Secret Team by Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty, ladies and gentlemen. The Secret Team by Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty, and it'll explain how the CIA controls things and does things like this. All right, we're going to break. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. We're back in a few minutes. Steve Stars and Christina Consolo. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm hanging out with Christina Consolo and Steve Stars. And right now, Christina's boyfriend has been kind enough to come on, and he's going to tell us his experience and what he went through. Because, like I said, you know, it's a collective experience, but they all had individual experiences with the cops, and that's what makes the story really weird. And, you know, why some of the shady stuff that was going on was, you know, they would talk to one person and ask them one thing, and I know police do that, but usually they would still ask some of the same questions, and every time it was, oh, it's about this person, or it's about this person, or that person. So, you know, good to get different viewpoints. So let's welcome him to the show. How are you? Say hello to the audience.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for having me on.
Let me ask you, when you were sitting in the car, I know you guys were talking about personal stuff. Were you surprised, like they rolled up on you, you know, kind of like SWAT team style, you know, I know how they do it. Did they draw their weapons on you guys at all? I forgot to ask you guys that, or I forgot to ask Christina that earlier. Did they ever draw their weapons on you at all or anything like that?
No, there were no weapons drawn. Although they pulled up in stormtrooper recon form, they didn't pull any weapons. And actually, the first officer that got out was next to my door, and my window was rolled down slightly, and I didn't roll it down anymore at that point. But he had asked me what was going on and what we were doing, sitting in the car. And I'd let him know we were just talking and asked him what was going on. And at that point, he asked me for my ID, and actually it was in a jacket. My ID was in a jacket in the back seat. And so I had to step out of the car, and I thought at that point I was going to give him the run around a little bit, knowing my rights, and start asking him some questions, but I could feel right away the energy that was coming off him. So I decided to go ahead and give him my ID. He looked at it for a second, and that's when I had, as Christina said, I asked him what was going on, if there was a problem. And as soon as I said that, he cocked. He stuck his chest out, put his arms down by his side, his hand by his gun, and the next line out of his mouth was, "There could be." And so I thought, oh, okay, I see where this is going. And quite honestly, I can't remember everything that was said at that point. I was a little taken aback. I didn't understand what was happening right away.
No, but, I know the feeling. I know the first time you have a run-in like this, next time you'll end up being more prepared. But the first time, it's always they always try to catch you off guard anyway, to screw with you.
Which
So
they did. Yeah,
they do. It doesn't surprise me that he chested up. See, obviously, they operate on this fear where everybody's a possible terrorist, and you see, as soon as you asked him a question, pretty much, and he didn't like what you said, and all of a sudden he had to rear out and put his hand on his gun like, I'm tough. I'm not afraid of you. I don't care if you know your rights. I'm tough. You know what I mean? Like, unprofessional, childish behavior.
Well, after he looked at my ID for a minute, and he asked a question or two, and then he said, well, we're not here for you. The problem was with her. And I thought, well, what's going on? First of all, I mean, the first thing that popped into my head was, we're sitting in a dark parking lot. There's a porch light maybe, 20 feet away from us, 30 feet away. Unless they had us surveilled previously, there's no way of knowing that she was sitting in my car. You couldn't even. There's no way that they could have been able to tell that was her. So I knew right then and there that something was fishy. It wasn't just a normal, they saw us sitting in a car and, maybe they thought we were smoking weed or something and decided to pull in, just happenstance. There was no way it happened that way. They
don't SWAT team. I mean, if they're looking for you for a reason, they SWAT team you like that. They come up, they roll up. But did they block the back of your car with one of the police cars? Like parked diagonally behind it so you couldn't pull out?
They parked. Well, I was backed in, but they did park. One parked to my on the driver's side, another one parked over on the other side, and then one in front. So yeah,
you weren't going anywhere. Yeah, they blocked you in.
No, we weren't going anywhere at all.
And you're like, what the hell did I? Did I blow a stop sign?
Right. And then after that, they pulled her out of the car and started talking to her, and I couldn't really hear everything that was being said. There was an undercover officer that was there. I wasn't too concerned with the other officers that were there. They were, aside from the one that had postured a little bit with me, he relaxed a little bit. The other officers seemed sort of relaxed, but there was an undercover officer that was there that we were getting. I mean, both of us talked about it afterwards. We both got the same feeling that he was really shady. He was definitely the leader of the pack. He was kind of sitting back, not really saying anything, just kind of watching what was going on, but at the same time, I could see he was really shifty. He was doing a lot of weird motions, and so he was definitely putting off some really strange vibes that, once again, we both picked up on after the fact. When we talked about it. After they pulled her out, and once they got, the daughter came down and they were talking to her. They took this 18-year-old girl. She's petite. 5 officers surrounding her, frisking her in the middle of a parking lot. I mean, it was just atrocious. I've had some experiences in my life, but never have I seen anything like that. I've seen it on TV, but come on. To see that was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, living it is a complete different experience. I know what you mean.
Oh, I would have been horrified at that age, even as a male, for that to be happening. So I can't imagine how she would have felt, And as it went on, it just got stranger and stranger. The officer that ended up taking her in, we were standing outside. I was trying to keep her warm. Like you said, it was like 10 degrees outside. It was ridiculously cold. And this guy couldn't get a word out, maybe one word every 30 seconds. He's trying to tell his story or trying to, give us all this information on the law and blah, 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 blah. And he's saying one word, and they play on his computer for 20 or 30 seconds, and they say another word. He was just keeping us out there as long as he possibly could. I mean, at that point, he had already called the Sterling Heights Police Department where they were going to transfer her to, and they were supposed to tell her over the radio they were going to meet him there in 20 minutes. He sat there keeping us outside for another half an hour before he even left. And at one point, he had said something about that he was talking about her daughter to her and saying something about avoiding situations, and he says the long arm of the law, and he reaches his arm out, and as he's doing it, and the way he said it, it was unreal. He looks right at Christina, like with these eyes that it was. I wanted to grip him up by his throat right there. It was.
I know what you mean. Like he looked at her like.
Exactly.
Oh, I know what you mean, dude. And you know what? I give you a lot of credit as a man for having the wherewithal to control yourself and not give a crap about his badge anymore and remove his arm from his body and stick it up his ass, because I know the exact feeling. I know what you mean. My
he
wife
knew what I was thinking. I looked him square in the eye. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I know what you mean, man. My wife is attractive, so I understand what happens when you get, these seething dirtbag animals looking at her. And so you got him in the face and gave him like the stink eye and told him like.
Yeah. I glared at him, and he looked back at me, but he didn't change his gaze at all. He felt like he was in control of the situation. So I just played it off as best I could. But the more we talked about it, the more I thought about it after the situation was over, and then especially when I heard later on, I had actually. I had to be up for work early the next morning, so I was in bed, and she went to pick her daughter up, and I didn't hear till the next day, what had happened with the other police department, and the more of it we put, started connecting the dots, it just got weirder and weirder. So I don't think it's over yet. I think it actually, for whatever it is, whatever the reason behind it is, I think it's just getting started at this point. So,
did you get a chance to talk to the other police officers that came down to pick up Christina's daughter? Because I know she said that they had mentioned to her daughter, like, that the other cops were, pretty much idiots or whatever. Did you get a chance to speak to them at all as well? Like, did you get that vibe off them?
No, I did not. I did not speak to them at all. I didn't know about any of that till after the fact.
So we got a few minutes before we go to break. So let me ask you this: do you think it's because of her work? Do you think Christina was the victim of this intimidation from your
quite honestly? And I've thought it over and over in my head, and I'm trying to be objective about it. But the more I think about it, and I'm not going to lie to you, I have a slight history with the police myself for some small issues, but they could have harassed me and got me going at any point, and tried to take me down, and they didn't do anything. The whole situation makes no sense at all. And the more I think about it, the more I feel like it is related to something that has to do with that. Yeah. And once again, I'm trying to be objective about it and think, okay, well, maybe could it possibly be because of the daughter? But that is, for an 18-year-old girl, I mean, come on. That's just not going to happen. And especially, like she said, for a trumped-up charge from 7 months ago that other police department isn't even looking for her for.
This is overkill, man. I mean...
Right, no, it's way overkill.
Yeah, it's way overkill. So this was intimidation. I mean, from my from my viewpoint, I would say intimidation. Steve, he feels the same way. We're going to get cut off by the break. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. This is the top of the hour break. It's about 8 minutes long. You can get up, stretch your legs, get something to drink. We will be back for hour number 2, Down the Rabbit Hole. Steve Stars, Christina Consolo. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on Down the Rabbit Hole. It is January 4th, 2012. I am hanging out with my good friend Steve Stars.
Good to be here.
Yeah, Steve, welcome. And joining Steve and I tonight is none other than the famous RadChick herself, Christina Consolo. And the first hour, she's been talking about her shakedown recently. Christina, let me ask you this. Do you think yourself that, you've heard us pontificate for the past hour. We were lucky enough to talk to your boyfriend in the last segment. Again, thank him very much from myself and the listeners for coming on. Do you think that, are you convinced 100% that this is not something, this wasn't just some random thing, that this was, somebody trying to, maybe send you a message perhaps like, hey, shut your mouth, stop, this will all go away if you stop, maybe, something like that?
It sure seems that way. I mean, and there was definitely a lot of intimidation going on. Like he said, the stormtrooper roll-up. It's just completely unnecessary under the circumstances. And, I've talked to my neighbors since then. I asked, did anybody videotape what was the circus that was going on out here, the other night? And they all saw it, and they were kind of wondering, too. And I explained the situation to them and the research that I'm doing, and, gave them my website info and stuff so they can look into mitigation for their kids. And just, I guess any publicity as far as the situation goes is good, because that is my goal, is to get the word out as much as possible. It's unfortunate that it has to come from this turn of events, but it's important for people to know, too, if you are, speaking out, especially right now with the kind of climate that we're in, and with NDAA and everything else going on, that you really got to watch yourself and take precautions. And I think it's a good idea if you're on YouTube, or if you're going to protest, or if you're even listening to any alternative media shows and you're in the chat room and so forth, I mean, you could potentially be considered a terrorist. And it's a good idea for anyone to make sure their cell phone camera that you've got room on your card to shoot some video if you get into a situation, and you have a right to do that. You're in a public place, having a public conversation, with a police officer, you're allowed to tape them. And, that's just how I'm going to handle it, and just document everything, like you said, write everything down, date it, all of our observations and everything that we remember for all of us to do, not just for me, but for everybody involved. And that's all you can really do. I mean, it's not going to make me stop. I will never shut up about this.
No, that wouldn't be good either, because, that doesn't protect you. The more vocal you are, the better off you are.
Right.
What I don't get is how these brain dead cops don't look and say, well, she's talking about Fukushima. Oh, she must be a terrorist. I mean, I wonder what crap they must have fed them, to go bust your chops like that. Because, I mean, if anybody looked into what you're talking about, it would benefit them to listen to you, especially if they have kids or a wife or any other family.
And I mean, months ago, I tried to warn that department from their chief of police that this was going on to protect their officers. It's not up to me to decide, who lives and who dies and who gets sick and who doesn't. I put the information out there. It's for everybody. If you listen to it or not, that's
I wonder
your
if
choice.
They initiated an investigation into you after you gave that information to the police department. Because the listeners might not, because sometimes people tune in or tune out, during the 2 hours. Briefly go over again that you gave what information you gave to the police department, and then let me get your thoughts on if you think that maybe that. Maybe they thought, oh, wow, she's weird. She's got to be some tinfoil hat wearer and, see something, say something, whatever. Maybe they started, keeping an eye on you then. So go ahead and, pick up from the beginning.
That's certainly possible. I might have been, flagged somehow. And the conversation I had with her was actually before I started making videos and going on the radio. I was still in the information gathering phase. And, without, any kind of verification from any of the sources that you would expect this information to be coming from, the health department, the EPA, the American Medical Association, in the absence of that and knowing what was going on, I said, someone must be, being told somewhere to take precautions. And the first thing I thought of was anyone connected to the government. And that includes, my friend that works at the Pentagon and, our police departments, especially with how much time they're outside, and especially that Labor Day weekend. It was insanely high here. And I really thought that something would have been said, at least in terms of air quality. If they didn't say it was radiation, they might have said, air quality was bad or something, but nothing. There was no indication. And it was just another red flag, but it was something I needed to find out, and it was kind of like the final, thing for me to say, I need to start talking about this, because this is just not right, what's happening, putting a lot of people at risk.
Christina, what is your website again, and how can they get your information? I just bring that up because I want to look at it myself.
It's RadChick Radiation Research and Mitigation on Facebook. And you can actually, if you go to FukushimaFacts.com, that is associated with Orion, you can link to it there. In fact, my feed goes into that website every day, and my forecast I do for fallout potential for Canada, the U.S., and Europe that I put out a couple times a week, that gets uploaded to that site too. So you can link to my YouTube channel from there. Or my Facebook page. And there's monitoring data also on that page where you can go to the actual EPA graphs and look at them yourself. And you can go to the Eurodet page and look at the European data sites. And we've had levels that were up, everywhere over New Year's weekend.
Yeah. Papa, I was just going to say that if this thing wasn't a problem, there wouldn't be any concern about talking about it. And if the police or the health department said, look, we've got to settle people down who are flying off the handle, concerned with something that really isn't a threat. If that were the case, wouldn't they come up to your door and say, Christina, here's the facts that we have. If you're scaring people, we're going to have to come over here and talk to you again. But, there's nothing here. So you're really in a situation where you're endangering the public by giving them bad information. But that's not what you're hearing here at all. We're not hearing anything.
Everything that I'm saying about the situation is all verifiable data.
Right.
From very well-respected researchers that I follow: Arnie Gunderson, Christopher Busby, Lauren Murray, Helen Caldecott, all the people that I think are absolutely on top of this stuff. All I'm doing is reiterating the studies that they cite, the information that they're giving, and very little of it comes from my personal observation, besides the fallout forecasts that I'm doing. But, I use all the data from Chernobyl. I use all the health effects of radiation based on the studies that were done in Chernobyl and extrapolate that. There was, 8,500 kilograms of uranium in the reactor that blew up in Chernobyl. There were 85,000 kilograms in the reactor that blew up in Fukushima. And you look at the weather patterns that happened with Chernobyl where the fallout occurred, and you look at the weather patterns that happened over here after Fukushima, and the data we found already: plutonium all the way in Boston, cesium levels in our soil in the U.S. from all over the U.S. that were actually 18,000% higher than what UC Berkeley had reported at the beginning of this. This is all verifiable data. And all I'm doing is
all you're doing is taking the data that's already out there and you're putting it together in an easy format for people to be able to read it and understand it. But that makes you a bad guy because you're making people think, Christina, and that's a crime now in new USSA. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break. Stay tuned. When we come back.
Great show tonight, Popeye. Really good show. I think it's just been quite eye-opening to me. I really do appreciate the work that Christina's been doing, exposing all the dangers of Fukushima, the high levels of radiation that we're seeing all over the place. And now we see this police harassment situation, which is just completely unexplainable. If you didn't catch that in the first part of the show, you got to go back and get the podcast, get this information out. And then, of course, what are the long-term effects of depleted uranium? What are the long-term effects of fallout? We've talked about the zombie apocalypse where people begin to break down, mood shifts, mental instability, all kinds of things like that, Popeye. Christina, what do you guys think? Is that something that's part of the potential of what we might be seeing down the road and all the time that, nobody's afraid to, well, everybody's afraid to talk about it under this Patriot Act lifestyle that we live now? Everything's national security and none of our business. And if you protrude into some of this information, you're in serious trouble. That's the way it seems to me.
Depleted uranium has been studied extensively about the effects that it's had on populations that we have bombed, and the horrendous fetal congenital abnormalities that have occurred, and Fallujah. People are having babies with one eye in their in the middle of their forehead. Right now, Christopher Busby just presented a talk on that, and by using hair samples from the population, he determined their exposure. Depleted uranium is only a fraction as dangerous as the uranium that blew out of those reactors. And uranium goes right to the brain, and it makes people crazy. And that was documented in 2002 by 5 soldiers at Fort Bragg that, within the span of a few months, killed their wives. And a couple of them then killed themselves afterward. And all of them tested positive for depleted uranium in their urine and in their semen. And today a study was released on Any News about the crazy effects that it had on wildlife around Chernobyl after that reactor blew up. They had foxes and wolves that were acting like they had rabies, randomly attacking people. They had a large boar that actually plowed into one of the researchers' cars that was on a road traveling to the reactor and almost ran the car off the road from the force of this animal hitting the car. And, it makes animals crazy and it makes people crazy. And I'm starting to wonder if that's what the zombie apocalypse is all about.
Yeah. It's definite nerve and brain damage related kinds of illnesses, it sounds like. And this is what, you're saying this is even far worse with the kind of Fukushima, which is high concentration fallout than what we've seen with even depleted uranium in places like Iraq, right?
Yeah, the depleted uranium is a byproduct of the stuff that they make to put in the reactors. The stuff in the reactors is many, many times more potent and dangerous. And then there's plutonium, which is finely ground into a powder before it's mixed into those MOX fuel pellets, which we know were running in the reactors at Fukushima. And then a couple quick stats on the lethality of plutonium. Carl Sagan had said years ago that 1 pound of plutonium evenly dispersed would kill 8 million people, but the math has actually been redone and it's been corrected to 1 pound of plutonium would kill 2 million people. 1 fuel rod weighs 650 kilograms. That's 2/3 of a ton. And 1 fuel rod has the potential to kill 2.89 billion people. There's 1,600 fuel rods in the spent fuel pool that's now leaning and losing water in reactor number 4. And reactor number 3 that blew up in March, that spent fuel pool only has 1 discernible fuel rod left. The other ones were blown all over the countryside into the ocean. They found portions of the fuel rod 1.5 miles away from the reactor. The rest of it was vaporized, turned into a gas, and floated over here. And especially the people that live in the Pacific Northwest breathed this stuff in heavily in the end of March, all of April, and all of May. And that's been determined from analysis that was done on car filters from the Seattle area.
Wow, it's amazing. So there's a large network of people now taking readings, and how accurate are the information readings coming back to us right now that we can, really ascertain where the clouds are moving, or where the fallout's hitting the hardest, and how much is out there?
Well, it's all crowdsourced data, and there's a radiation watch page on Facebook where people post their data. They talk to each other and learning how to use their Geiger counters. There's a lot of people that were getting them at Christmas. So we should have a lot more people inputting data there. And they, everyone realizes like the importance of being correct in these measurements. And the Geiger counter is really kind of a crude measurement of what's going on. You can't really measure the concentration of these isotopes. You can't really measure the number, the type of particles. You can tell that there's radiation there and if it's high or not, but you can't really break it down without a gamma spectrometer. Our government has thousands of gamma spectrometers all over the country, and they're not using them, because they shut down all the food testing and soil testing and rain testing and drinking water testing. It's all being done by individuals who are concerned about this. And Any News also has a forum where people can post their radiation data and also post mutations that they see, things like yellow rain. I've found in following some videos that people have shot of sunsets around the area. One of Phoenix in particular, back in the end of September, had a really canary yellow sky. And the only time that you can get a canary yellow sky is either if there's volcanic activity or there's radiation in the air. And there's a couple different types of radiation that would make the sky look yellow. So I put out a video warning about that, and the next day the numbers were outrageously high of what the air quality was that day. So that's an indication. There's just signs in our environment that we need to follow. And there's a few sites, and it's expanding all the time. There's people that are driving around in their car with their Geiger counter mounted on their dashboard, taking readings. One guy in particular did the entire Olympic Peninsula over the weekend, and he's currently putting all of his data into a mapping program that he's going to make sure is user-friendly so that other people can upload it and start doing surveys in their area. And it's kind of crude compared to the instruments that the government has available to them, but it's the best thing we have, and that's what people have been doing in Japan, too. They've been taking it upon themselves to determine where are these areas, because they almost follow like a leopard spot pattern.
Right.
And that was shown from surveys that were done in Chernobyl and Kiev and the cities around there, Belarus, that it doesn't all fall over, equally distributed. The areas that are low-lying, where water accumulates, are where the numbers are the highest, and anywhere where there's a lot of trees, because the leaves and the branches and the bark collect the radiation particles also.
Wow. Interesting. Now,
we're all learning. We're all learning as we go and trying to help each other.
I'm going to cut you two off because the break is sneaking up on us. When we get back, I want to get into solutions. And I know you and I talked about that on Sunday, but we might as well, since we're talking about radiation and Fukushima again here, you should, always offer some solutions while we're talking about it. That way we can give people some hope as well as the horrific news. So, ladies and gentlemen, stay right there. We'll be back in a few minutes. Don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't like to give out tons of bad news without at least giving you 10 minutes of solutions. So, we have 2 segments left here. And I'm going to get Steve's thoughts on everything and, any ideas he's got. But I want to ask Christina her ideas on solutions first, because it's important, and I know I will forget. So, Christina, what can people do to mitigate their exposure? Obviously, they can't, stop themselves from being exposed, because unless they're not in the area that's, that's being exposed. But if they're in an area, if they go on and they go to like Fukushima Facts or whatever, and they find that the area they're in has a higher concentration of radioactive materials, what can they do to mitigate the damage being done to their body?
Well, the easiest ways to avoid it is by staying inside as much as possible and avoiding any contact with precipitation. Rain, snow, hail, high winds. Keeping their mouth covered, like with a scarf, or those things you pull up, like the skiers wear, the neck gaiters, when you go outside, just so you have a bit of filtration. But really avoiding precipitation is a big one. Filtering your water, buying your water at the grocery store, the reverse osmosis, or at the very least using a filtration system at home with activated carbon. Eating lower on the food chain, avoiding dairy, as much as possible, or cutting down on meat and dairy, so we get a better handle on food testing. And I'm trying to get some people working on that, and some of the grocery stores in my area have been somewhat receptive to that also. And then when you buy fruits and vegetables, especially if they're from California, you want to just soak them in a solution of baking soda and water for about 20 minutes. If there's any hot particles that are stuck to the fruit or vegetables, baking soda will neutralize them, and then you just rinse them off with your fresh water and put them away. And then work more things into your diet that are anti-cancer foods, foods that are known to help with free radicals, so your cells can help repair themselves. And eating seaweed is actually very beneficial, but you don't want to buy any from Japan. And today I saw a video on YouTube of a guy testing seaweed that was from South Korea, and through the bag it was pretty high. So if you don't have a Geiger counter, you might want to think about getting one. There's actually an app I know the Droid phones can run it, and it's an app to measure radiation. It turns your phone into a Geiger counter, and it's a little, crude. It's only $5, but it does work. And I've tested it out. It's a new Geiger counter I should be getting in the mail any day, and I'm going to do some tests against the phone one to see. But so far, people who have used it said that they're getting decent results, and just, turning that thing on when you walk through the grocery store and just seeing it. If you're starting to get a lot of clicks by the fish counter, walk away from it. And check dates on stuff too. Anything that you can buy that was packaged before 3/11. Although it's getting hard to find that stuff unless you go to like a food warehouse. It's a good idea, and especially it's really, really important that people do this type of mitigation if they have little kids or babies, and especially if they're mixing baby formula with tap water. Boiling does not remove radiation. It's little kids and babies that are going to be the most affected by this. And so far, the one published study that we have shows 14,000 deaths have been attributed. A majority of those were infants under 12 months of age. And it's because of cell division and because their bodies are small that they're so profoundly affected. And, of course, anyone who's pregnant should be very careful with the food that they're eating. And if you can't, the Geiger counter is the best one for the cheapest amount of money. It's called the Soaks. You can get them on eBay. It's kind of hard to get them from the manufacturers right now. You can get one the quickest on eBay, and they're like $170 delivered. So if you can't afford to get one, maybe you can go in with somebody, a couple of your neighbors or a couple of family members, and you guys can share it. And, based on what I'm seeing all over the country, there's definitely a need for it. Just to be more aware and pay more attention to the story. And once you get your family under control and you're doing everything you can to minimize your exposure, then, start helping other people do it as well. And, they wake up to this, they start waking up to other things too.
Yeah, very good. I was going to ask you a question real quick, Christina. As I understand now, the hot particles, the MOX particles, plutonium, cesium, some of these are not registered by Geiger counters because you have to see gamma rays with these to identify them. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's different Geiger counters measure different things. I have an old Geiger counter that actually measures alpha, beta, and gamma, but the newer ones just measure the beta and gamma.
Okay. Is there any way that we would, say, for example, notice these particles in nature? Would you notice spots on leaves, or would you see anything like that you know?
Oh, yeah, for
Okay.
sure. And I photographed some of that stuff around here back in July. We have mutations occurring in the plants here. And mutations in the last set of ducks that was born in the pond behind my house. One of them had a small wing, and she had 9 babies, and only one of them lived, and not the one with the small wing either. So the plants look like they have a bunch of plants growing out the top of it. It almost looks like a pom-pom on top of a plant. I've had some people say they've seen a lot of albino insects over the summer. That could be attributed to it. And if you see this kind of stuff, take a picture of it and upload it to my Facebook page, Mutation Watch. I got that started a couple months ago in anticipation of the spring, because I think we're going to be seeing, with the stuff laying around on the ground and from the snow melt, that a lot of the fast-growing plants, like weeds, like dandelions, will show it first. And that was already happening in Canada, in Alberta, towards the end of summer. They were photographing dandelions with 4 heads and huge stems and things like that. You will notice it if you're looking for it. The other thing I noticed is all summer we didn't have a single earthworm that came out on the pavement after a rainstorm. Usually there's worms all over the place.
Right. Yeah.
If you go like in a barn and you dig into the ground, there are worms there, okay. But if you dig into the ground outside, there's either no worms or they're very lethargic.
Sick.
Those are all clues in nature, and I have a video out about that, too, where I list all of them and have the photographs of the mutations that I've seen. And I live in Michigan, and, so I'm not even near the Pacific Northwest, and I'm seeing this kind of stuff. And I've also heard people reporting different colors in plants and in chickens. in the Pacific Northwest. They had some weird colored chickens, and that's one of the things, mutations sometimes alter the color of plants and animals in strange ways.
Yeah, we should look at those things and start compiling data on them and seeing these photographs and then trying to correlate those with readings, I think, as well. You know, I was just going to say, though, that I think you've done such an incredible job in the first part of the show. If listeners didn't catch it, this police harassment really is impressive upon me, that you're flying over the target and you're getting flack. Something's going on here. I mean, they do not want us to know this stuff, Christine.
Yeah, they wouldn't be screwing with you if you weren't, you know, zeroing in on something that was accurate. You know, if you were just talking out of your ass, you know, and some tinfoil hat wearing kook, you know, they would leave you alone. They'd be like, oh, that's just, you know, crazy Christina. But no, if you really hit a nerve, that's when they come and start screwing with you.
Yeah, yeah.
We should follow this up, and I'd like to get as many, if possible, try to see if we can get as many inside perspectives from some of the cops that were there that night, ask them some questions. If necessary, get an attorney, and I can, I'll talk around a little bit to a friend, like I said, of mine who was a former assistant DA and defense attorney, and get some ideas and say, look, you know, what's going on with this? He's also concerned about these issues. He's been with us on shows before, and, you know, we really need to get you some help. If necessary, in terms of the costs involved in getting these tapes from the dashboards, all the information you need. Maybe we can talk about doing that, Popeye.
Yeah, I agree. If you know what, we'll talk about that on the other side of the break. We'll figure out a way that maybe if the listeners want to help Christina help her get a hold of the dash cam videos via the Freedom of Information Act. You know, if they want to help donate to that or something, maybe we can help arrange that. We'll see what we can do. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We'll be back with the final segment. Don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with the final segment of the January 4th, 2012 edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. I want to say thank you to all the listeners for tuning in and hanging out with me for 2 hours. As always, it is a pleasure to come on and bring you, ladies and gentlemen, information. I always try to make it relevant. I always try to give you guys, I don't want to say a show because I don't like the way that sounds, but I guess for lack of a better word, I have to say that. So I always try to give you a good episode or a good show. Tonight I've been hanging out with my buddy Steve. You all know Steve Stars, filmmaker and researcher extraordinaire. And we've been hanging out with my new friend, Christina Consolo, a.k.a. the RadChick. I'm sure everybody knows her by now that are my listeners. And there's plenty of people listening to the stream tonight that are probably Christina's loyal followers on her Facebook or on YouTube. So I want to thank you guys for tuning in and listening. Christina, we got a few minutes. I'm going to give you guys, you and Steve, the floor here. And anything that you guys feel that is super important that we didn't cover, I want you to go ahead and talk about. First, Steve, before we forget, you give out your website and where they can see your video and where, any other things you want to give out. And then you can throw it over to Christina and she can give out I want you to give out your information on your Facebook and everything again, because you can't get enough publicity for what you're doing. And any other websites with pertinent information about radiation facts as well, where the listeners can go educate themselves. So, Steve, first you, and then you can throw the ball to Christina. Go ahead.
Okay, well, thanks, Popeye. As usual, an excellent program and presentation with a superb guest. And I really want to, first of all, encourage people to support FederalJack.com and Popeye's work, friends, because he's there. He's a fighter. I've been listening to him and working with him for a while. There's a few people in this truth movement that I have a lot of respect for in the work they're doing. Visit FederalJack.com and help Popeye keep getting this information out, because the guy's a real giver. He really is. My website is AIDS Fraud aidsfraudvideo.com. We talk about the HIV/AIDS fraud. All this stuff interrelates because we're talking about the International Health Control Grid, which is really a part of what's happening here. They don't have solutions, friends, for this nuclear radiation. And that's one of the reasons why they're keeping this so hushed up, because this situation is pertaining to the entire world health situation. So, the entire world health situation is completely out of control, unmonitored, and there's so much secrecy and lies, just damned lies going on here. Now you hear Christina's story tonight. You get this podcast, get it out to your friends. I'm going to take this site podcast off, and I'm going to send it to a lot of people that I know that are just kind of borderline on listening to the truth right now to hear this information. She's being intimidated by the police. She's being hassled, harassed, harangued because she's getting information out that they don't want you to know. Now, they can tell you that this is for national security, but we know what that means. It's security for the people who are in trouble and who are the maniacs behind this elitist New World Order situation. So you can visit my website, AIDS Fraud Video, if you like, but I would really encourage you to help Popeye and Christina. And Christina, I know that you're going to be giving out your information. Just maybe one more question while everybody gets their crayon, as Bob Tuskin says, and gets ready to copy down your information so they can visit your sites. You've given us some solutions. Christopher Busby is a man I have a lot of respect for, too. How long is the half-life on this stuff? I mean, what do we do to clean this up? What do you think we're going to have to do, and what kind of worldwide effort are we going to have to really identify this problem and finally put an end to these toxic, nuclear reactors that are causing this much trouble? What do you suggest?
Well, to break it down in order of importance, really the biggest threat right now, and most immediate threat, is if this spent fuel pool, which is very precarious. If that thing tips over or catches on fire, everyone would have to shelter indoors. And you really need to talk about this with your family and already think about and scope out like what you would need in terms of like water, non-perishable food, medication, diapers, stuff to keep the kids busy, playing cards. Bathroom facilities. What are you going to do with the pets? Just talk about that stuff now, because if it happens, and it really could happen any day, with how that thing is sitting there and the earthquakes that are going on around Japan. There was a 7.0 on New Year's Day, right after midnight. Just be ready and be prepared so that you're not scared if it does happen. So you have some kind of plan together. And, the second biggest thing is dealing with the releases now and just doing simple things to mitigate. If you avoid the precipitation, you filter your water, you're already doing a lot just by those two things. And then, once you get your family situated, try to talk to people who have access to other groups of people, especially people who work in schools, because all of the kids in schools are drinking out of the drinking fountains, and that water is not filtered. And, eventually, and hopefully sooner than later, we've got to get these nuke plants shut down over here. There's 23 of them that they call double-decker beach bombs. They're the Mark I boiling water reactor, like the ones that blew up in Japan. They've got the spent fuel pools on top of the reactor. They're very unstable. People who worked at GE and designed them quit in protest after the prototypes were ran. Everything that I've said tonight, if you have any doubt about it, go to any news, go to my website. Everything is verifiable. There's links to every single article. Everything that I have talked about tonight is on there, and you can see it for yourself.
Okay, get those websites out again real quick, if you will, Christina.
All right, if you go to Fukushima Facts, FukushimaFacts.com has a link to my YouTube and a link to my page on Facebook. It's RadChick, Radiation, Research and Mitigation. If I had any idea so many people would be looking for it, I wouldn't have made the title that long. I can't change it now, and you have to put the whole thing in to find me. Or you can just find me. My last name is Consollo, Consollo, and link to it through there. And just pay attention to this and get rid of your cable and start using alternative media, because you're not getting any useful information from mainstream media. Everything is controlled by the corporations and the government, and even the cops and the military have no clue what's going on. We're all being duped.
Did you see Man Coulter tell everybody that radiation is good for you on
yeah,
Fox
she's an
News?
Idiot, though.
Yeah, she is an idiot. She is an idiot.
And it's not true. All of it's bad for you. All of it.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have any kind of background in nuclear physics to understand that. Just watch a 1-hour documentary on Chernobyl. There's tons of good ones on YouTube. And see what happened to the people around there and the kids around there. And the stuff that they're still dealing with 25 years later. Even Gorbachev feels so bad he runs a foundation for people who have been hurt by the radiation fallout. You know, that's the one big thing that we learned from Chernobyl, is that it's much more devastating on people's health than we were ever told. And Fukushima is much worse. In fact, some researchers estimate, based on the number of fuel that is already burned and is on that site, and the corium that's under the plants, that Fukushima is anywhere from 300 to 1,000 times higher in terms of lethal effects than Chernobyl was.
Wow. Yeah, and it's still there is the problem. Chernobyl even came to an end at some point, and this thing is just getting ready to blow up again, and almost did. So this is incredible information. You know, we got to follow up, Popeye, on the whole situation with this police harassment as well, because these cops obviously don't know what they're doing, and I'd like to find out if some of them might be reconsidering what is happening here and what happened with all of this situation, because the dangerous thing about this, Popeye, is not what we're hearing. It's what we're not hearing. That's the real problem, right, with this. I mean, it's from the very beginning. Remember when Obama was supposed to make a speech at the Japanese embassy? CNN advertised this, and then he didn't show. This tells you there's something very seriously wrong with this whole situation.
Yeah, because they said to him, look, Barack, or actually, he's not Barack. They were like, look, Barry, do you want to be able to, read at night without a light, and glow in the dark? Then don't go speak there. And he was like, all right, good point. And, of course, they make up some stupid excuse, but they won't tell people, you can't breathe this in, you can't breathe that. And it's disgusting how they treat people. It really is. And I'm glad that I could get Christina back on the show again so soon. Unfortunately, it was under, crappy circumstances, at least partially for her.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks that you're getting harassed, but again, like Steve said, you get the most flack when you're right over the target. So if you weren't on point, then you wouldn't be getting screwed with. It's when you're doing something right that you get screwed with, So
that's right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
You must be doing something right. I thank you for all the work you do, Christina, and I know the listeners do as well.
Thanks, and I'll keep you posted with anything that I find out.
Yeah, keep me posted with anything new. You know how to get in touch with me, and don't hang up. I'll say goodbye to you off air. Steve, thank you for coming on again. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on and hanging out, dude.
My pleasure, man. Once again,
it's always a pleasure to hang out with you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Thank you for taking 2 hours out of your time to listen to me. I will be back Friday. Same bat time, same bat channel. I hope you learned a few things out of this show tonight. I'm out.
And they wanted to know what we were doing in the car, and we said we were just talking, and they took our IDs, and after a little while they came and they took my boyfriend out of the car and questioned him, and he asked, what is the problem? What exactly is going on here? And they said, our problem isn't with you, but we might have a problem with her. And they pointed to me. And they asked him some questions. Eventually they came and got me out of the car, too. They said that my kids wouldn't open the door to my house. They had been there earlier while we were at the store. And I told them, well, that's what they're instructed to do, is not open the door to anyone when I'm not home. And they seemed very irritated by that. They didn't have any kind of warrants or anything. They told us several lies, which are verifiable. They at first said that one of my kids was involved in a hit and run the night before, which wasn't true. She had one of my girls had a slight fender bender. she stopped. They exchanged information, which is what was all verified later. And then they said that the information she had given about the license plate was wrong, and that wasn't true either. She had given all the appropriate information. And then they were questioning me again, asking what we were talking about. I said we were just having a personal conversation. It wasn't any of their business. And they decided after a good hour and a half of this, making us stand outside in 10-degree weather, that they were going to take one of my kids in for an old shoplifting warrant. And we haven't been able to determine yet that there even was a warrant. She was with somebody who stole one CD from Walmart.
Either we heal as a team, or we're going to crumble. Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen, believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell. 1 inch at a time. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from you. I mean, that's part of life. But you only learn that when you start losing stuff. You find out life's this game of inches. So is football. Because in either game, life or football, the margin for error is so small. I mean, 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the fucking difference between winning and losing. Between living and dying. I'll tell you this, in any fight, it's the guy who's willing to die who's going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is. There's 6 inches in front of your face. Now, I can't make you do it. You got to look at the guy next to you. Look into his eyes. Now, I think you're going to see a guy who will go that inch with you. You're going to see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're going to do the same for him. That's a team, gentlemen. And either we heal now as a team, or we will die as individuals.
Ideas are bulletproof.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. It is January 4th, 2012. This is another live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. And tonight, I have an info-packed show for you, ladies and gentlemen. I have 2 very special guests that are going to hang out with me tonight. Both of them have been guests here on my show before, but this is the first time that they are both on the show together. Very important that I have both of them on. Not just because I get different viewpoints, but because one of them, who was a recent guest on my show, has been threatened. And in fact, we're going to get right into that. So let me introduce them, and then we'll get right into what I was talking about. First, let me say hello to my good buddy, Steve Stars. Steve, how are you tonight?
Very good, Popeye. Glad to be with you. A lot of news going on. A great guest that you have coming up pretty quick here, and so we'll commence and get into a great show.
Thanks for coming on and hanging out, Steve. I appreciate it. My other guest is Christina Consolo, a.k.a. the RadChick, who was on my show for 2 hours this past Sunday, and afterwards had a interesting experience a couple days later, and that's why she's back on tonight. She's going to hang out for as long as she wants to, too. But I wanted to get her on to talk specifically about this first tonight because, you know, the more spotlight we shed on something, a lot of the times the safer researchers are. So, Christina, welcome to the show, and tell the listeners what you and your daughter went through. We have a few minutes before break, so go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay, well, 2 days after I was on your show, there was another problem at Fukushima. One of the spent fuel pools started losing water after a big earthquake that they had there on the 1st. And that next evening, my boyfriend and I went to the Army-Navy surplus store to kind of price out some stuff if we needed to shelter indoors in case something happened. And you and I had kind of talked extensively about that scenario. But it seemed to be happening maybe a little quicker than I anticipated. So we had gone to the Army-Navy surplus, and we didn't buy anything, and thank goodness we didn't, because we would have had all kinds of crazy stuff in our car if we did, like gas masks and things of that nature. We were sitting in the car for maybe 5 minutes, no longer than 10 minutes, and we were actually having a very lovely conversation. And all of a sudden, our car was surrounded by police officers. There were 5 cars that pulled up. They blocked us in. They parked on either side of us. There was about 7 officers from 3 different departments, 2 undercover guys. And then over the course of the next 2 hours, there were a couple other cars that came and left to see what was going on. And it was a very, very strange and surreal situation. There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of different stories being told to different people. They told, when they first got there, they wouldn't let us out of the car. They asked what we were doing in the car. We said we were just talking.
And this isn't on a public street either. This is in your parking lot.
This is parked right in front of my apartment in my parking spot.
Yeah, so this is in your complex. So this is off the street on private property.
Right, about 7 months ago. So, the situation doesn't make any sense at all. The outcome of it is they took her to jail. I had to bail her out later on. She was obviously very upset by the situation. There was some strange things that happened with the frisking that she had to go through, and I'm attempting to get all of the dash cams from all the cars and all of the mic recordings if they're available under the Freedom of Information Act. But we're dealing with 3 different departments, 7 or 8 officers. It's $25 a pop for each one of these recordings and videos. And
what is it, $25 per officer?
Per officer and per dash cam. So we're talking like $300 to $400 to get this stuff together, but it's going to take probably a couple weeks because they have to close out whatever their investigation is. It was just a very, very strange situation, and none of them really seemed to know. Like, it seemed like they were really fishing.
Yeah, it seems like they were fishing, and they were more like they were sent there to kind of scare you and harass you. We're going to get cut off by the break. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Christina's going to hang out with us. We're going to get more into this when we get back. I want to get Steve's thoughts on this and more, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. In the chat room, somebody brought up they must have been following her for weeks, and I had made the same comment to Christina when she first told me about this, and we talked about it for a couple hours last night, and when she related the story to me, I kept asking her all sorts of questions, details that she could remember, And there were undercover cops there. And the way that they had rolled up on her while she was in her car, to somebody that has, I used to be a federal law enforcement, agent through the